Hi friends, welcome to this latest episode of the Nationalist View, and today we have with us a very special guest, Mr. Gautam Chakrabarti. Gautamji, thank you so much for taking time out from your busy schedule. And let me tell you, Gautamji is joining us from Germany and he's in Berlin right now. Though generally we don't, disclose the location of the guests which we have for obvious reasons, because at times we do a lot of discussion on sensitive issues also. But I'm mentioning this because right now, no, it's the weather conditions are, pretty challenging there, and there has been, a prolonged power cut there also because some of the so-called, communists. So they burned down basically, some, power transformer and other connecting equipment, and because of that, and that too when a snow blizzard is happening there. So amidst that, Gautamji has joined us from there. So many thanks to you, Gautamji, and really appreciate the effort which you have made to join us and share your deep insights with our viewers. So I'll be giving Gautamji
Always,
is a geopolitics. Yeah.
always a pleasure, Arunji. Always a pleasure. And the power cut, like one of the things about facing such problems in Europe or perhaps also in the US, I don't know, but I can speak for Europe, is that we people like me then look at our systems with more tolerance because it took 4 to 5 days, or in some areas maybe 5 to 6 days, for the supply to be reinstated temporarily. So in Calcutta, where there were lots of power cuts, I remember supply was reinstated temporarily within a day and semi-permanently within 4 or 5 days. So here temporarily takes 4 or 5 days. Germans, of course, are very secure in what they do. They want to make sure of everything. But yeah, the fact
So
remains.
Gautam
But
ji is a geopolitics expert, and we will be giving his detailed, bio in the description also. He is also into academia, and he has been on our show in the past. And Gautam ji, correct me if I state it wrongly, but we are going to talk about Bangladesh today, and we are talking with Gautam ji about Bangladesh because his family actually, his roots are in, what is Bangladesh today, what used to be East Pakistan before 1971. So, as a geopolitics expert, and also he has a deep understanding of the cultural context, which most of the analysts tend to miss when they talk about geopolitics. But geopolitics is deeply rooted in the cultural context also. So we are going to talk about what is happening in Bangladesh. And so, Gautamji, my first question is that since the formation of the Yunus-led interim regime, there have been repeated reports of attacks on Hindu homes, temples, and businesses, and now they have escalated in run-up to the 12th February elections, which are scheduled to be held there. So, as a geopolitics expert, as a scholar, how do you assess this recent surge of attacks? And does it reflect the state weakness? Does it reflect the tacit political signaling? Or does it reflect a deeper ideological shift? Or does it reflect all these three things?
first of all, thank you so very much, Arunji, for having me back on the show. It's always a pleasure talking with you, especially given the non-judgmental and open attitude you have to international politics and geopolitics, which is very refreshing. Um, uh, Countries, societies, institutions, and companies which regularly lecture the whole world about democracy should, take a leaf out of your book. So, about Bangladesh, you're absolutely right. The roots of my family lie in Bangladesh, although my maternal grandfather came to study in Calcutta, studied history, by the way, he in 1910 or 11, I believe. So, on the mother's side, my mother was born in India. independent India, of course. And on my father's side, they were in Bangladesh till the 40s or 50s, or East Pakistan at that time. But on my mother's side, everyone, more or less, a lot of people came before independence. So it's pretty far away. But we do maintain a connect in the sense we have connections with some former Rayat, like we had some small lands, I'm told, and there was some, sharecroppers and farmers and gentlemen farmers and Rayat, jisko Hindi mein bolte hain na. So we did have some connections when my grandparents were there. I also want to make clear that my family personally, although naturally they left Bangladesh because it wasn't possible to be safe and secure there, especially as small landholders, right? I mean, I wouldn't put a fine point on that. We didn't have much land, but just maybe, small. Um, so I'm not claiming we were these big zamindars of Maiman Singh and all that. No, that's also a running gag. Many people in West Bengal, people say that all East Bengalis were zamindars, so, which can't be true. So, anyways, the point is, what I wanted to say is, in our family discussions and family history, there were no massive tragedies of murder or abduction, or so we don't know about that. But of course, the history of partition, which was horrific in the Punjab. So a lot of writing on partition, a lot of literature and film on partition in India has been focusing on Punjab. And I think it is fair to say that the violence in Punjab was horrific, and the transfer of population was also near total between East and West Punjab. So we grew up with this sense, and the general sense in West Bengal was that Bangladesh was maybe not as bad. So Bengali Muslims are not as bad in the sense. I'm talking of discussions in Bengali Hindu circles. So Bengali speaking Muslims are more progressive than, or were more progressive in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s than West Pakistani Muslims or West Pakistani Muslim Islamists, let's say that way. I would like to say Yain. This is a German word which means ja plus nine, which means yes and no. It is probably a fact that the Bengalophone, Bengali-speaking Muslim intelligentsia was, on an average, shall we say, more inclusive or more open to coexistence with the minorities than, West Pakistani intelligentsia. It is also probably true that the massive violence of partition was a shade less in Bengal, but actually, it's not really true because yes, it is true that a lot of the rioters on the Muslim side were importees from Bihar and North India and Pathans. So the Muslim League sort of brought in goons from West Pakistan, what later became West Pakistan, to create violence. But I think it is not factual to, as many, Indian Bengali intellectuals tend to do. I don't think it's factual to say that the Bengali speaking Muslim in what is today Bangladesh or what was East Pakistan was such a more liberal and inclusive person than her or his West Pakistani counterpart, right? So this is something you must understand. The Honorable Sheikh Mujib himself was a leader of the Muslim League, right? This is something people forget. And the name Awami League comes after, with the independence struggle to separate it from the Muslim League. So in that sense, you can say even the political DNA of Bangabandhu, the father of Bangladesh, the father of the nation of Bangladesh, is also, I would say, political Islam. But I draw a distinction there. I see Sheikh Mujib, his family, and certainly and I hope it's okay to say this openly, the de jure and rightfully democratically elected Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina. She as a person and the family, of course, Sheikh Mujib, represented a moderate face of political Islam. I would put it like that. I would, I mean, when one looks at the things Sheikh Mujib did after he came to power in Bangladesh, obviously he wanted a secular, inclusive state, as secular as one can be in a Muslim majority country. I have to say this. I mean, uh, one must always have that rider. In mathematics in school, we learnt about riders. So one must add this rider. I think Sheikh Mujibur Rahman seriously tried to create a state after 1971, which was as secular, which would be as secular and inclusive as a Muslim majority nation can be. Okay, but we all know what happened thereafter. The Islamist elements in the army, the reactionary elements in society, uh, the many very reactionary elements which were only suppressed by 1971. They were not eliminated, and I think this is the mistake the Indian establishment did, uh, against the better advice of people like Kaul Sahab, the who founded the Indian intelligence agency RNAW, RAW,
Cow,
Research and
Mr. Cow.
Mr. Kao, yeah,
No, yeah, yeah.
Kao Sahab, Kao, not Kaul, I said Kao Sahab. So, so against better judgment of Kao Sahab, he warned Sheikh Mujib that he might be assassinated. There's a plot hatching, but Sheikh Mujib, I would say, sadly and unfortunately, you know, he was a mass leader, and he genuinely loved his people, the Bengali-speaking people of Bangladesh. So Sheikh Mujib was, in that sense, a person of integrity and propriety and culture and refinement. He was interested in music, the arts, culture, and although his politics was moderate political Islam, but he genuinely wanted a plural Bangladesh. Now, Sheikh Mujib thought that the whole Bengali speaking population of Bangladesh was with him. And this is a mistake for which he paid with his life. I think many people in the so called democratic countries who are very keen to pronounce judgment on the global south without having any idea of the global south, they mistake Sheikh Hasina's policies when she came to power as authoritarian, dictatorial, corrupt, and Al Jazeera did regular hatchet jobs on the Awami League. This has been going on for a long time. So the ground for uh, Professor Yunus was being prepared for a long time. Al Jazeera was doing these so-called, investigations into political corruption in Bangladesh. They were going to Scandinavia to trace Awami League money. Now, I don't want to comment on internal Bangladeshi politics. I mean, the Bangladesh Awami League could have been a corrupt party. India is also full of corrupt political parties. Every country is full of corrupt political parties. That's a separate issue. But what I'm trying to say is that the way Al Jazeera and some other international media houses focused on Sheikh Hasina and her party in the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years, showed that a ground was being prepared to either pressurize Sheikh Hasina into something, or if she refused pressurization, to remove her from power, to execute regime change, which is what happened last year. This, to come directly to your question, emboldened uh, the radical Islamist element in Bangladeshi society, which was always there. This is something one has to understand. They were present there before partition. The Muslim League, the Indian Muslim League, was founded in Dhaka, as you know. So there has been always a rambunctious, riotous, violent, murderous element in Bangladeshi society. And actually, that's present in Bengali society too, West Bengali society. So this element has always been there. Sheikh Hasina succeeded through her political measures, through her anti-terrorist measures, through her very spirited defense of her legacy, of the legacy of the Bangabandhu. Sheikh Hasina succeeded in suppressing these people. There were trials, there were executions, and of course, the usual suspects globally wept bucket loads of tears at executions in Bangladesh. But we now see why those executions took place, because Sheikh Hasina wanted to suppress this violent, I would be hesitant to use the word genocidal, because these guys are not capable of genocide. I mean, they're just rioters. But this pogrom happy mobs of Bangladeshi Islamism, so she kept them in check, which does not mean that they were not there. They were always there. If you remember the murders of bloggers that were happening, people's hands were chopped off, people were brutally murdered. And Sheikh Hasina herself also, as Taslima Nasreen and other Bangladeshi dissidents and writers pointed out. So Sheikh Hasina also was not as hard as was perhaps in hindsight necessary with Islamists. That said, it is always difficult to run an Islamist republic and go all out against political Islam. So you have to have that, balance. And Sheikh Hasina was trying to, if we look at what she did all these years, it's very clear that her party and she were trying to balance the suppression of these very radical elements with giving political Islam a platform. So atrocities against Hindus were happening in her during her tenure as well. But the general atmosphere was against these atrocities. So Hindus and other minorities, by the way, the Buddhist Chakmas of the Chittagong Hill tribes, that's where my family comes from, the Chittagong tract, and the Christian minorities, everyone was under pressure, but at least they had a sense that Sheikh Hasina is there, the Bangabandhu's daughter is there. So there is this hope for the minorities. And once she was removed, one must remember Nobel Prize here and there, Congressional Medal of Freedom here and there, presidential medals here and there. Mr. Yunus came to power clearly with the help of radical Islamist mobsters and thugs. I don't know if Mr. Yunus is happy about this. I mean, he's an academic. He has won the Nobel Prize. Whether or not he deserved it is a debate Bangladeshis, I will leave to Bangladeshis and economists. To what extent microfinance was originally his idea and not a Norwegian idea? To what extent people in Bangladesh, his Bangladeshi colleagues and students helped him with it? These are debates I don't want to get into. But Mr. Yunus got the Nobel Prize. He got 2 presidential medals from the United States. It's a very, very remarkable career. A Bangladeshi economist and technocrat being so close to the transatlantic political establishment. Why? How? As the Germans would say, wozu? To what end? Right? Why does the US, which doesn't even consider Bangladesh as, if you asked His Excellency, the current president of the United States, he probably wouldn't be able to point Bangladesh at a map, on a map. So why is this particular person from Bangladesh? Why does he have such a smooth trajectory in transatlantic academic circles, which even eminent scholars like Professor Amartya Sen don't have? Right? What is in this person that is so interesting to the transatlantic establishment? Because the theory and research on microfinance is not his. It comes from Scandinavia. The origins of the theory of microcredit and microfinance are not from Mr. Yunus, Professor Yunus's work. They were already there. He just, through his Grameen Bank, implemented them in Bangladesh. This is one. The second thing, what we must remember, is that Sheikh Hasina's government accused Mr. Yunus of a number of financial and other improprieties in the Grameen Bank. Various scholars, journalists have pointed out lots of lapses in the Grameen Bank in terms of finances, whether this microfinance has really helped, poor rural women as it claims to have had. So these are all open questions. I wouldn't be able to say if they're true or not true, but what I'm trying to say is Mr. Yunus's stellar career in transatlantic academic and political circles. I mean, come on, what are the odds of of a technocrat slash professor from Bangladesh getting two presidential medals in the United States and a Nobel Prize. This is a bit fishy. Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is whatever. We have a gentleman who's suave, who's very sophisticated, who's intellectual, who's soft spoken, but he comes to power riding on an Islamist mob, which was lynching, raping, abducting, brutalizing, burning throughout the transformation in last year and also at regular intervals thereafter. And he repeatedly refuses, apart from sometimes when the pressure is too high and too many atrocities have happened, he goes and meets some Hindu priests or leaders, and then puts out a statement. But he is absolutely unapologetic about the fact that he came to power riding the Islamist mob. Now, I, intellectuals and academicians shouldn't be so blasé about being in bed with murderous, radical, fanatical thugs. And this is something I used to respect him a lot in the sense, I'm an academic, so we tend to respect other academics. And Mr. Yunus always struck me as a gentle, soft-spoken, intellectual, calm person. I was deeply shocked by his absolute refusal, his absolute happiness or his lack of unhappiness at the fact that he came to power illegally. I mean, by all definitions and all international law, the way Mr. Yunus came to power is illegal. It's a regime change. You can also say it's an externally aided regime change for which the foot soldiers were Bangladeshi Islamists and thugs. And of course, originally it was a students' movement, which was, overtaken by radical Islamists. And the military saw its opportunity and stepped in. So this is the situation. So my huge sort of, I would say, exasperation and embarrassment as a Bengali speaking person and someone who has his roots in Bangladesh is how could a person of Mr. Yunus's stature, how will he live with this on his legacy? Because he's going to go very soon, right? And his Wikipedia page will have it on record that he came to power based on Islamist thugs. So I'm wondering what is the incentive for this person to be happy with this sort of an arrangement? Or is this a quid pro quo for the kind of career he has had? You see? So to finish my answer to your question, I think the problem with the minority situation in Bangladesh is not today's. I think Bangladeshi intellectuals need to be, whenever in my personal circles also, whenever I discuss this with Bangladeshi intellectuals, some of them are genuinely shocked and embarrassed, but most of them, I have to say, hit back with saying that what is the situation in India? So this is not helpful because the situation in India with the minorities is nowhere, not in the wildest dreams comparable to the situation of minorities in Bangladesh. So I think Bangladeshi intelligentsia has to step up and own up. Singing in front of Chaya Not, as we saw some weeks back, and asking Islamists in that beautiful song, Tora Manush Ho, be people, be humans, I think that's not enough. I think Bangladeshi intelligentsia has to seriously question itself as to why one of their own has come to power riding on the back of a murderous Islamist mob.
Gautamji, uh, will skip the general basically kind of the very generalized kind of observations or the generalized kind of questions which people kind of make about the Bangladesh situation, and we'll go and try and dig a little deeper, especially you being there. So as you are watching the whole situation, do you think, these elections will happen, let's say on 12th of February? What do the Hindus of Bangladesh and the other minorities of Bangladesh need to do to protect themselves? One second, does Indian government have a role to play in that? So, what Indian government should be or what Indian establishment should be doing uh, in terms of the broad contours, basically, because one of the things is that one of the common narratives is that Jamaat-e-Islami, which wants to capture power in Bangladesh. So they are actually instigating all these killings of the Hindus so that Indian government should react. And when the Indian government and the Indian public will react, so that will help them to drum up, the anti-India sentiment and ride on that. So it becomes a very tricky situation because our Hindu brothers and sisters, so when they are getting, killed, raped, brutalized, as you mentioned also, and as it is there in the news also, uh, so what we need to do basically, and also one of the options which is often discussed is that we should let the Bangladeshi Hindus, if they want to come to India, so we should open our doors and let them come here, so at least they'll be protected here. So though that itself is fraught with a lot of this thing, because when they come, and if they come to the northeast, and then there can be internal ethnic tensions there also. One second, it is very difficult to kind of differentiate whether a Bangladeshi radical Muslim is coming here in the garb of with the identification of a Bangladeshi Hindu. Also, Bangladeshi, a substantial chunk of Hindus are there in Bangladesh. So there is still, some leverage basically, India has there, if we talk it in terms of the real politic. But if, all the Hindus, they move to India from Bangladesh, so, that leverage will also go and it will become an absolute Islamist republic. Not republic, but an absolute Islamist nation, just like Pakistan. So I have said all these things basically. What is the way forward? Because we have identified the problem. The problem has been identified, and as you rightly said that an anti-Hindu sentiment in Bangladesh is nothing new. The only thing is that it's getting escalated with Yunus riding on the support of the Islamists. And it's a clear cut, now contest between, BNP and Jamaat-e-Islami when it comes to elections. So if we get down to the ground level kind of a thing, so what is the way forward for Hindus of Bangladesh? And we don't, let's say that with an assumption that the West is not going to, come to the rescue of Hindus of Bangladesh and the other minorities. So what is the way forward for, Bangladeshi minorities, especially Hindus? And what is it that basically India needs to do?
Well, I mean, this is a big issue, of course, and as you also pointed out, it has a lot of complexities involved, right? I mean, um, India has been historically close to Sheikh Hasina because, obviously, because of the role of her father and her entire family in the war for Bangladeshi independence, which was won by the Indian Army. It was a stellar feat. I mean, no one in the world knows about it, but it remains the largest surrender of a land army after 1945. It was a, I would even say, to use a German word, a Sternstunde, a stellar moment in independent India's history. I would say that was the highest moment in Indian. There is no moment which is higher in post-independence India's history than that victory. And here one must remember the nefarious and completely inhuman role the then American administration played in this whole saga. So much so that also conscientious and moral American diplomats in the Dhaka embassy of the United States sent a telegram called the Blood Telegram. I'm sure you know of this episode to the Nixon administration. But Nixon, who is the only American president to have ever been impeached, rightfully so, for the wrong reasons perhaps, but was a thug. I mean, there is no other way of putting that guy. The way he behaved with Mrs. Gandhi. Um, Dr. Kissinger, Henry Kissinger, was a scholar, a statesman, and genuinely loved his country, a patriot. So I'm usually a bit hesitant to critique Dr. Kissinger because he was a scholar, a statesman. He's genuinely an American patriot. If you Nixon was a thug, but Dr. Kissinger was an American patriot. But both of them colluded in the genocide of Bangladeshi Hindus and Muslims in 1971. I mean, sending the American Navy, the Seventh Fleet, and many people don't know how desperate the situation was. The Indian Navy, even in discussions with Mrs. Gandhi, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, even came up with plans to, you know, do suicide missions against the Seventh Fleet. They were planning to ram their destroyers against the Seventh Fleet ships. So, and then Soviet submarines came up with their beacons in the Arabian Sea, and that, you know, the Soviet Pacific Fleet. People who regularly ask me in Europe about what is this India-Russia thing. The India-Russia thing is because of 1971. Not only. There's a lot of prehistory which I've written about. There's a lot of post-history. But the India-Russia relationship has been sealed by 1971. And it is being continually sealed more and more by the actions of the so-called democratic West, whose best friends are genocidal and murderous fundamentalists and tin pot dictators. So if you see in Latin America who America's friends were and who America has been murdering and toppling in the last 70, 80 years, then, you know, I don't have to repeat all that. So the point is the so-called democratic and, you know, progressive West, their friends in the global South are the most abandoned dictators possible. Not to mention terrorists, Mujahideen, Taliban, Al-Qaeda. I mean, Osama bin Laden was an ally of the Americans against the Soviets. So one must remember this. Saddam Hussein was an ally of the Americans against Iran, against the Islamic Republic of Iran. So these things, you know, are papered over in discussions, but these are important contexts. My point is, given these international aspects, now Sheikh Hasina, before she was ousted, made this claim that a white person threatened her with regime change if she didn't surrender sovereignty over a Bangladeshi island. I don't know. That is Sheikh Hasina's statement. One has to take the statement by a sitting prime minister seriously. Sheikh Hasina, I'm sure, wouldn't have said it just like that. There must be something to that, but that's for investigative journalists from your tribe, so to say, to figure out, and also, of course, for intelligence agencies the world over. I would say that I would rather give Sheikh Hasina the benefit of the doubt than give the notoriously imperialist and hegemonic transatlantic establishment, which has just kidnapped. I'm no supporter of President Maduro. I think he has done quite a number of wrong things towards his own people. But the fact remains that the Americans just kidnapped a sitting president from a sovereign nation and is now trying him in their courts. If that is not imperialism, I don't know what is. Now, the very fact that there is not a flurry and a cascade of condemnation from all European capitals is itself raises questions about the sovereignty of European capitals. But these are bigger issues. What I'm trying to say is all this makes the Bangladesh issue a bit complicated geopolitically. But there are complications and there are stark truths. The stark truth is radical violent Islamism is extremely sorry, I just, because I have enabled gestures, so I'm giving myself a thumbs up, which I didn't want to do. So,
It's fine, it's fine. Yeah.
thank you. So, violent, radical, genocidal Islamism is going to increase in Bangladesh. I don't know that much about BNP politics. The internal politics of Bangladesh is not something I'm very interested in. I'm more interested in the cultural politics, the society, and I have this interest in Sheikh Hasina's family because of the Bangabandhu, a very impressive South Asian political figure of the 20th century, no doubt. Bangabandhu deserved to be the prime minister of an united Pakistan, which the West Pakistanis, because of their ethno-cultural racism, didn't allow. But so he was one of the tallest leaders of South Asian Islam, the Bangabandhu. And when he was alive, he traveled to the Maghreb, to West Asia, and people were impressed by his personality and his commitment to the people of Bangladesh. So I'm more interested. I would say, more knowledge about the Awami League and Sheikh Hasina's family, illustrious family. But I don't know that much about the BNP, so I would not hazard a guess. But my sense is the BNP itself would like to be a, a serious governing party, unlike the Yunus regime. The Yunus regime is just a regime change vehicle. So that's nothing more. But I would say the BNP itself would wish to govern, but the BNP has to realize that its biggest enemy is not the Awami League or Sheikh Hasina's family. Its biggest enemies, people who would gladly lynch their people if they came to power. So it's not about the Awami League. It's about anyone who's trying to be moderate and somewhat secular, or if not secular, at least normal. So that's something the BNP will have to figure out, because it's clear that the elections will be won by the BNP. Because, it's not clear. Maybe the Jamaat will win them, but I have a sense maybe not. Because Begum Khaleda Zia passed away, that should also produce some sympathy vote. And the Awami League has been banned. So I think the chances are the BNP. So India should engage with the BNP, as India is doing. But in the long term, I don't think the future of Bangladeshi Hindus is rosy. And I would even say, even if in the very, as of now, it seems very improbable, but who knows, if the Indian establishment has had enough of the situation in Bangladesh, who knows what the Indian establishment might decide to do. The Americans have just kidnapped a president from a sovereign country, and they're going to run the country and use its oil. I don't think if India decides to take punitive action in Bangladesh, I don't think the Bangladesh army will survive more than a few days, or maybe a couple of days. I don't know. That's for military historians and strategists to figure out. But what I'm sure of is, if the Indian government and the Indian establishment decides to undertake, in my opinion, a richly deserved police action. You remember Hyderabad after independence, right? Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel launched a police action against the Hyderabad state because they're massacring Hindus, right? The same things are happening in Bangladesh to a much greater extent. So if police action against the state of Hyderabad was justified then, it is surely justified now against Bangladesh. But that's for the Indian state to decide. If the Indian state decides to do that police action, I do not know how long the Bangladeshi army will survive. But what I do know is not a single American Marine will descend on Bangladesh to save the Bangladeshi army. And I think there are quarters in Bangladesh which know this, right? Mr. Yunus will, he will be exfiltrated from Bangladesh by people who have been running his life and career for a long time. But the others won't be. So I think it's for the Bangladeshi establishment to figure out to what extent they can irritate India. Because in the current geopolitical situation, I don't think anyone is coming to save Bangladesh if India decides to do a police action. There may be sanctions, but it's like when you threaten punishment too much, its value gets less. So I think the transatlantic establishment and their sanctions wouldn't work that way. And I would say that the Indian establishment is probably looking at different scenarios. And I would think that if I were a Bangladeshi political strategist, or if I were a figure in the Bangladeshi establishment, I would be a bit scared. So the thing you pointed out about Bangladeshi Hindus and other minorities coming to India, it's a trickiest question. Again, a yine question, no yes and no answer. As individuals, as human beings, I would think they would have better lives in India. Of course, everything depends on the community. There are, I'm sure, many Muslims who are very loving and caring about their neighbors. At least I would like to hope. So I'm sure Hindus have survived and Buddhists have survived, Christians have survived amongst Muslims, and they have very good neighborly relations. So it depends a lot on the community in question, the neighborhood in question. But with increasing radicalization, which is being promoted by transatlantic and forces like Al Jazeera, the Qataris, and others, I would say those spaces are shrinking. So more and more communities are becoming radicalized. So I would say maybe if I were a Bangladeshi Hindu, I would want to move to India or somewhere else. So I think India has a moral and historical duty to Bangladeshi minorities, especially the Hindus and Buddhists, of also the Christians. And it would be great if India could. I mean, I know what you're saying, that there's always the chance that radical elements might infiltrate. And coming from Bengal, I know that documents, passports, visas, ration cards have no sanctity whatsoever. So in the Bengal region, so fake documents in Assam also, fake documents are circulated on a monumental scale. But perhaps our intelligence agencies are capable enough to, separate the wheat from the chaff. So I would request the government of India, the Indian establishment, to allow all Bangladeshi minorities who want to come to India to let them to come to India, because their future there is not secure.
So thank you, Gautam ji, and we'll wind up the conversation here, and we'll soon be having Gautam ji again, back on our show to take this discussion further. And once again, thank you, Gautam ji, for taking time out from your busy schedule and for joining us. And thank you, viewers, for watching this. And we'll be back soon with another conversation on another topic. And of course, we'll continue to keep tracking the Bangladesh story. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.